I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the Identities part of my law series. I think it's clear who will be the first subject of this. In fact, it's in the title. The multiverse is full of worlds that are as varied as the grains of sand on the beach. Some near identical at first glance, others noticeably different. For example, what if instead of collapsing and submitting to the will of the prescripts upon finding out their source, Jan Vismok continued to defy this belief and instead of distorting into the inky typewriter monster, he manifested EGO, killed Morai, and trashed that source of the prescripts. Although it could just be something as mundane as Roland the Black Stain having a different kind of beer to accompany a meal with Angelica. While individuals like Iori, the Purple Tear, can travel to them and back. Individuals like Yi Sang, using his mirror technology, can provide access to alternates for himself and the rest of the damn dozen, along with any abilities and experience they might have. Azia had the glass window technology, which accessed more alternates but with much less stability, which led to a few distortions being made when the Ring experimented with it. At least one by choice. As for the worlds accessible by both, that is what we'll cover. I'll be doing this on a character-by-character basis. Certainly for the first three, I will be covering what each of the sinners have access to between Chapter 1 and Chapter 3.5. Any identities that appeared after Chapter 3.5, I'll cover in the Chapter 4 lore video. Well, the identities that appear in Chapter 4, along with any that a certain other individual. Oh, you'll know what I mean once we get to that, but before that, let us start with a member of the damned dozen who was the focus of Chapter 1. And that is, of course, Gregor. Let's go over the backstory of Gregor. He was captured by a previous iteration of G-Corps, one that dealt with biomimetic weapons as their singularity, where it seems to involve genetic engineering, which gave those that had their weapons fitted insectoid characteristics. For some reason. Herman, the scientist that was knowledgeable about the, augmentation procedure, gave him an insectoid right arm, where it was revealed based on the identity so far that he was either born without a right arm or he lost it before he was taken by the old G-Corps. Well, it certainly wasn't removed during the experimentation. He was abducted like so many others as child soldiers. A different recruitment method to most wings. He was subjected to his conditioning in order to be able to use his arm by the old G-Corps, with Herman being in charge of that. After he demonstrated his aptitude with his apparently stable biomimetic arm, he was sent to fight during the Smoke War, where he received a medal for service during that. After the Smoke War ended and the old G-Corps was on the losing side, and was likely replaced with the G-Corps that makes gravity spheres, he did his best not to draw attention, Unfortunately, he lost control of his emotions, and his arm was attacking random people in the subway station. He asked a security guard to cut his arm off, which he did. Unfortunately, he discovered that his arm had a healing factor, so he had to flee the area. And sometime after that, Faust found him and recruited him. This was how it happened in the main universe, and other minor variations of it. But there are worlds in the multiverse where events happened quite differently. Here are the first of the identities to be covered, along with the theories of why it happened differently. Personality-wise, he's chummy overall. He's also a nicotine addict, and even though he would rather stay away from his more militaristic past, he understands what he needs to do in order to get what he signed up for. He understands Dante's position better than most, as both were forced into doing what they were doing without having a full understanding of why. He also couldn't care less about his appearance. He's a friendly person who, if he had a tarot reading, it could be summed up with, "You, my friend, are well and truly." He also sucks at acting, along with something else which I shall cover later in this. Let's start with the New Association South Section 6 identity. Specifically with the story of this mirror identity. Outside a building with paper lanterns on it, which might be somewhere in District 10, but then again it might be somewhere else in the south of the city. Gregor, a fixer within the Limbus Association, an association specializing in all-out war, is taking care of some ruffians, asking them, what about what he was doing was unfair? It got his attention. This made him throw who he was grabbing aside. Then he sat in front of the one who spoke to him. They were gazing at each other. That ruffian was wincing at him, seeing it as weird that he can shoot fire from his fists. Gregor was mildly amused by this, as any fixer can get themselves a weapon from some workshop. And they think that having an arm with a built-in flamethrower is weird. He did mention that he didn't use any of his fire magic when he knocked him flat, asking what gives. Well, it's not because they believe that you want to cosplay as a black mage from a Final Fantasy game. Then the wincing ruffian did something incredibly stupid. Didn't think much of him putting it as magic. Gregor was criticizing his choices, as he's too weak. That simple. He's going to get everyone killed if he picks fights with random guys passing by. Apparently, that was the problem for the wincing ruffian. This made Gregor adjust his glasses. Random guys passing by. Questioning this person, it was revealed that they were rats punching above their own weight, asking how it makes sense for a straggly prune like him to beat up 8 healthy young people, well, none of them are likely to have augmentations. Gregor certainly wasn't impressed by these insults. He's heard that a lot, advising that he chose nicer words around him. Then the ruffian called him short. A total mess. Now that last one he disputed. Then the ruffian made fun of his 5-month shadow beard and his bird's nest hair, and just as he was about to finish, Gregor had heard enough, and he burned the ruffian with a punch that would impress Captain Falcon. Yes, Captain Falcon. That guy. Should have just ran while he had the chance. After that, he lit his cigarette with his burning fist. All because he didn't want to go get a lighter. I theorize that this version of Gregor, instead of being taken by the old G-Corps, he became a fixer and found himself recruited by the Lu Association. And in this case, he was recruited by choice. And fitted with a prosthetic arm, created with the Association's specialization in mind, as in all-out war. Certainly when it was fitted. It has a built-in fire source, perfect for dealing with numbers, although most within Section 6 use gauntlets that delivered a burning punch, like their character from the Street Fighter series, meaning that he has greater physical strength with his right arm. To put it into perspective, Zhao had a sword, and she was in Lu South Section 1. Yes, they have to earn the right to wield weapons of their preference. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had basic training within the Lu Association involving martial arts to better utilize the fire gauntlets that rookie Lu fixers wielded. Clearly, he was worth the investment, likely having it fitted on him on loan along with the gauntlets, which in his case meant that he'd have a spare for his flesh arm. Although considering that he has a prosthetic for his right arm, let's hope that the hammer and nail of that reality doesn't find out about him, as that would make him a heretic. Although considering that he's with the Lu Association, attacking him would provoke the Lu Association, so on the other hand, they'd consider it a mistake to attack the Lu Association, likely waiting for him to be separated before even considering attacking him. The main reason, because Cole was a viable target. It was because the prosthetic users weren't built for combat, nor were they trained to fight. As for the prosthetic arm, it also has a lack of feeling, which is a good thing to that version of Gregor, as it means it doesn't mean... doesn't mean that he feels pain with that arm, as, well, he doesn't. Although one thing he has in common with the main Gregor is he still hates frontline combat. Next we have his old G-Corps manager corporal, Identity. And his identity story involves the Smoke War. and him using his biomimetic arms, yes, both of them are insectoid, slamming his enemy repeatedly, whether it be hacking away or stabbing. The enemy were being killed. His medal was present to show the troubles that he went through. His eyes that once had a gleam were now devoid of any life. Was that war meaningless? Multiple wings fighting each other. It was being questioned if the many children who fought in the same war were a part of them. Regardless of whether that was considered or not, there was no desire or wish of any kind, besides skewering the hearts of his enemies. He used to salute with pure passion, but his span was as short as his memory. His mind was tired and battered. Stifling his emotions was the way to go, or at least it would seem. The divergence point of this Gregor would appear to be after Gregor was taken by old G-Corps, but instead of Herman fitting him with a stable biomimetic arm that didn't result in any unpleasant side effects like most others that underwent that augmentation process. The augmentation procedure, in his case, took over much of his body, growing insect wings, changing both his arms to insectoid, while keeping his head human. Unfortunately, this changed him into something more fierce, more savage than the main Gregor, and unable to pass for normal. Well, less so than the main version of Gregor. He was certainly less talkative than him. All he focused on was to kill the enemy until they were all dead, or he was dead. Clearly the Herman of that reality was more ambitious and wanted to do better than give him an insectoid arm that has a healing factor. Which went well, spectacularly well, or disastrous, depending on how you see the results. Before, he was still capable of speech, at least outside of battle. He knew that he could never return to civilian life after what he had done on him, fully devoted to fighting for the cause of that version of G-Corps. Yes, he was likely in a role similar to Tomar, that soldier that fought in the Smoke War. Who knows? The Tomar of that universe might be on the bus instead of Gregor. Well, it's certainly not that version of Gregor, as he's more animalistic. Next we have his RB sous chef identity. And his identity story involves a random no-name thug chasing a slippery intending to rob him. He was backed into a dead end, trapped by their robber. The pursuer was armed with a long sword wielded in two hands, now intending to kill him, as well as rob him, telling him to stop resisting as there's nowhere to run. Sadly for the thug, he was too busy talking and not doing enough, not even paying attention to his surroundings, as his quarry made another way to escape by a gap on the right of him. As for the thug, he was a member of a backstreet syndicate, one with no known finger affiliation. He was also annoyed by his target's persistence. He decided to follow him wherever he went, behind an iron door covered in red rust. The thug thought that this was to render his long sword useless, so he put his long sword away and took out a shorter weapon. he had come prepared for this situation. Sadly for the thug, it was a trap with him in mind. And the one who he was pursuing surprised him, and was revealed to be Gregor, who was gripping his neck with his flesh arm and readying his cleaver with his prosthetic arm. The thug couldn't believe his role reversal. Gregor couldn't give a about the length of his weapon. No ingredient had crawled into his workshop and come out of it alive. The thug was confused and slightly worried. Gregor making it clear that he was tricked into making a direct delivery. The thug realized that he had followed Gregor into a warehouse in the streets of Flavor. Well, he's boned. Gregor asked why he started a fight with a random passerby like that. But now, they have his attention, and he wants to know his meat quality. The thug realized that he followed Gregor to Ryushu's, and Gregor confirmed this, saying, "Welcome to RB," making it clear that he's not fond of that shop's name. The mugger had turned into miserable prey. Not many have not heard of them. The restaurants around the back streets of District 23 that made pies out of human meats. Gregor got it that their establishment is named after her since she set things up. She called it RB and not Ryushu's Bistro. He joined late, tolerating smacks on the head and the insults while teaching him how to cook, even though he didn't understand how she names things. His work was vital in every step, from procuring ingredients to cutting, trimming, and preparing the meat. So why couldn't he tell her to give their establishment a better name? He knocked him with the back of his old cleaver, while complimenting and poking his prey on the shoulder. The thug considered the opinions of Gregor as deserving of respect, and Gregor was not flattered, as it's quite a sharp turn to calling him and then calling him sir. The thug apologized, but that wasn't going to make Gregor let him go. Then the thug was growing more desperate, saying that if he was sure of his abilities, why didn't he kill Ryushu and take her spot, offering to help? Yes, Gregor thought it was a good idea. The thug asking for him to be let go as a reward. Gregor then killed the thug and butchered him. He appreciated the nice words, but flattering him will not make the pasty hand pies as good as Chef Ryushu's. While he was working, he admits that she gets on his nerves, threatening to fire him all the time, but she's not a bad cook to learn from, which meant he had to behave. For now. Now, he might have hesitated to kill that thug if he used to be a distinguished chef. Gregor had plans, but he was biding his time. Clearly, in that reality, whatever Ryushu's background in the main story, at some point she set up RB, or Ryushu's Bistro, and then later she recruited Gregor. Around the time when he would have been abducted by the old G-Corp. Yes. Who in that reality is her sous chef, and had a crude prosthetic arm fitted. They're basically the Pierre and Jack of that reality. Psychotic cannibal chefs making a living in the back streets of District 23. Yes, Cannibal Central. Basically, Sweeney Todd without the need for the barbershop front business. Although Ryosho and Gregor still had their personalities mostly the same in that world. Unlike Pierre and Jack in the main universe, where they like each other to the point where we might think that they were together, Ryosho and Gregor, on the other hand, they barely got on with each other, tolerating each other for the sake of business. Much like they were close to physically attacking each other during the Hell's Chicken story in Chapter 3.5. In this reality, they were loosely allied with each other, willing to turn on each other if they've outlasted their usefulness. But so far, they still see usefulness in each other, where Gregor was willing to tolerate the verbal and physical abuse from Ryosho, intending to literally stab her in the back once he's shown enough proficiency in the culinary arts. Makes you wonder where that reality's Pierre and Jack are. Possibly with the damned dozen. Either that or dead and eaten by Ryosho and Gregor. Why? Project Moon, why do you go back to that place? Well, he's certainly a better cook than the main version of Gregor. The main version throwing together leftovers and canned food and calls that a good meal. Then again, he probably had to make do with what he had at the time. With RB, he had more resources and training. He joked around with hinting that his right flesh arm having been eaten. But it was likely lost before he was hired. It would appear that the constant with at least these variations of Gregor is that he lost his right arm at some point before the old G-Corp found him. And with these variants, and also the main version, he either had a biomimetic replacement or a prosthetic arm, designed to make him better able to function in whatever role he ended up in. It's interesting how well each adapted to their circumstances. The Lou variant is disciplined, not willing to be violent unless it's part of the job or if threatened enough by others. With the old G-Corp variant, he was devoid of any compassion, any empathy, anything that would get in the way of becoming a predator. With the sous chef variant, he was disturbingly fine with cannibalism, to the point where he butchered any foolish individual enough to wander into his trap. Although his life prior to being taken by the old G-Corp is currently unknown, the right arm being not there was one thing that didn't change. Although it's quite a varied set of careers, isn't it? The Lou variant being more professional and a more voluntary kind of mercenary. As in, it was a career that he chose rather than being conscripted as he was in the old G-Corps variants, and also the main version. Where he wasn't just an experimental test subject, but he was also turned into an almost bestial weapon that is less able to pass for human. While the RB sous chef variant is a twisted kind of chef that hunts people to keep the supply of ingredients coming. There will be more variants coming. I'll cover those that appear in future Identity lore videos after the Season 1 ones. We'll see how they turn out. Who knows, there's probably a gender-bending universe out there, but that's not going to be covered, as that'd just be like the main version, except everyone there is the opposite gender. although other variants will appear, some seemingly mundane and nice to be around, others might be complete monsters inside, while the rest will be somewhere in between. We're done with Gregor for now. The next one will be involving Rodion. Until next time.
Hail the rabbit!